and we have Gary here with us. He is going to tell us a little bit more, but I already know that you are betting on the digital way, especially on digital art, starting more than a year ago with what you did with Refik Anadol. So I invite you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell them how you started to get into this little world.
Thank you. Does anybody not know the Casa Batlló here? Okay, easier on the ground. So the truth is that the commitment to digital comes from almost a decade ago. It has had its different moments. Evidently, we have welcomed and received technologies of all kinds. Today, I am not going to tell you about any new technology that you do not know. Fortunately, information nowadays flows and is, as you were saying, very frenetic, so it is difficult not to be up to date without being really connected to it. The Casa Batlló, before telling you the example of Refik, which is an illustrative way, let's say, of putting these technologies into practice, I want to explain that it is nothing new, but the Casa Batlló is a work of art. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and therefore it is untouchable. We as managers have two responsibilities, which is to preserve and disseminate it. Preserving it obviously means restoring it and taking care of it so that it is always in its best condition. And we dedicate body and soul to make it so. And disseminating it is where it opens up a variety of options and proposals, from the most traditional ones, which many of us have experienced when we visit a heritage site, a museum or an exhibition center, to the craziest, most innovative, funniest, most groundbreaking ideas you can imagine. So we are in the latter sector because of the DNA of the whole team that many of you are with me here today. We all have this vibration for innovation. When you combine innovation with art, then things as beautiful as Casa Batlló itself emerge. Casa Batlló is a work of innovation in architecture. Thinking that art etymologically from Latin comes from ars, which is to do a work, project or task with a lot of creativity, which is what in essence is the Casa Batlló. Innovate comes from innovare, which is to introduce novelty in a field. So technologies are all around us today. Today we have heard a lot about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, as I interpret it, is like electricity. That is, it has no value in itself. The value lies in the benefit you get from applying electricity to a tool or a service. It is exactly the same with artificial intelligence. More and more applications are coming out, and the technologies at Casa Batlló, we interpret and read them with that code. We try to decipher them to see what they can contribute to us to communicate in a different way. Art, and even more so world heritage, does not change. What changes are people. And consistent with that change, with that evolution, our discourse must also change and evolve. So we are attentive to everything that comes out. And Refik Anadol's work is a clear example of this. We started working with Refik pre-pandemia. We gave him a very special commission, the result of a renovation we did in the building. We wanted to end the visit by giving a wow, let's say, to the customer's experience, to the visitor. And thinking about that, we came up with the idea of creating something impossible for the visitor, taking advantage of the fact that we had a space where we could, a basement where there was no architectural value, and we could put an immersive installation. Unlike the rest of the house, which are all ecological or more ecological, semi-invisible installations. We played a lot with illusionism, with magical effects to never blur or obscure what people come to see. On the other hand, in this room we could, and we asked Refik, well, it was not so easy, but the question in question was, could you recreate a trip to Gaudi's mind? That is, could you help us so that after the visitor has gone inside one of his works, he can go inside his head, see what he saw, think how he thought, interpret nature, the data as he interpreted them. Obviously, it is an impossible and implausible question, but seen from Refik's head. And those of you who know his work know that it is a very abstract work, but at the same time very cultured and very rich in terms of the data he uses, that he uses the meta information that underlies all the archives. And with that meta information, he makes his compositions, let's say, artistic. To get people into Gaudi, the first thing we did was to create the digital archive, the world's largest digital library on Gaudi. It took us 4 months of basically scanning the internet, and we got 1.1 billion documents impossible to read in 10 human lifetimes. Thanks to technology, he was able to interpret all that information, and with a lot of machine learning, he started to compute all the analogies or all the interpretations or underlying information, let's say, within all these files, and start composing his work. So what Refik presented, a video in which you get inside Godie's mind, is a very abstract perspective, very non-photorealistic with his style, with his marked DNA of the artist. And to do that, well, obviously we couldn't put a 3x3 screen because it would detract from such a challenge. And we built the world's first virtual reality experience that doesn't require the use of glasses. Basically creating a giant goggle, a perfect six-sided LED cube with no edges that we put people inside and the lights come on. You have a wraparound LED screen that sends the visitor away. And as a result of this good relationship with him, it was obviously focused on creating and selling NFTs. At that time, NFTs were very much in vogue. Not that they are not now, but they were kind of booming, weren't they? We approached him about doing a project together. Then the NFTs have had a very bad press because of the monkeys and the amount of misuse that has been given to them. But an NFT is nothing more than a record of an element. It can be digital or tangible, but it is an ID. It is a way of registering an ID in the blockchain. And this ID can be assigned characteristics to understand each other. So it's a way to give it a record. So what we wanted to do was to make a work of art with it. But of course, we already had the work of art, so we didn't want to detract from the heritage we were taking care of. And Refik came up with an idea that we immediately accepted and presented, which is that Casa Batlló is a house that can only be enjoyed by those who have it in front of them, because there are many dimensions beyond the physical ones that can only be perceived on the real plane. On the digital plane, there are videos, static images, photos that have that coldness, that barrier, he tells me. And if we could, through a digital creation, give life to the Casa Batlló, we could create a total work of art. So the way to bring it to life was to identify all the factors that interfere in the real world with Casa Batlló, which are mainly meteorological, the light, the rain, the wind, the people, the noise of everyday life, right? So the work he composed would be like having one of these surveillance cameras, let's say, but in art format. So what I'm going to show you now is a sampler. It's a 3-minute clip. The real work is owned by a collector. Refik used by incorporating sensors. He is able to detect rainy days and give them a graphic. He is able to detect the time of sunrise, sunset incidents, and so he changes the chromaticism. If a day is windy, it represents it with this type of effects. That is to say, he has created, let's say, I repeat from his narrative palette, which many of you know, an abstract artistic way of giving life to a building that is a World Heritage Site. So the real work is in permanent change. It would be like having a surveillance camera, but with this look and feel. So it allows you to have it in an NFT format. The NFT itself is not a video, but it is a private and encrypted connection to a server that transmits in real time what happens to the house. So you have this work, and it is at night in Barcelona. You will see darker images if it is daytime, and so on.
In fact, the work was sold at Christie's a year ago, along with works by Picasso, Van Gogh. In other words, it was the first time a work like that was sold.
We did a very cool thing as a marketing campaign. This is not so much artificial intelligence, but it's fun to tell. And we came up with the idea to promote it, to put it in Rockefeller Center in New York, which was where the auction was. And then it was to mine the NFT live in front of everybody. So we asked Refik if he could do a mapping on the facade with this work. It is not the literal projection of what you are seeing on the facade, because the facade has volume, a TV. But well, let's say that he used much of the work done to project a mapping, and on the projection of this mapping that welcomed a lot of people. We did the minting of the NFT that was being auctioned at Christie's 2 days later.
And I would say that this photo almost doesn't do it justice because it was really spectacular. I mean, the movement.
Here you can see how many people were there.
There were more than 40,000 people, I think, right? plus all the people connected and then the people who have been watching it afterwards. So it was really a way of incorporating the experience with technology, but respecting the past and the heritage, right? And how do you see that? Because, for example, with the Dali exhibition, we are also trying to do a little bit of that, respecting the past and these great artists, but also giving an opening to new digital artists, because we do not necessarily have to separate digital or not, but new artists, so that also with those inspirations, they can show us what is coming for the future. And how do you see that? The role of heritage and the new generations and a way to incorporate technology that is respectful, no?
Well, I personally see it as a precious moment at a planetary level. I mean, we are at a time when innovation is the common denominator in almost all industries, and those who like this is like being in an amusement park all the time. It's fantastic to live in this era, really. Art throughout history has embraced many trades. In ancient Greece, astronomy was embraced as an art. China embraced calligraphy and themes related to death. The medieval age embraced dance, that is, art is not a closed bag where some things are considered art and others are not, but the evolution is embracing different disciplines. Digital art for me is a new discipline, different from plastic or pictorial art. It is a different discipline that has not knocked on the door. It has appeared through the big door and has broken many barriers of entry, taboos and status quo that formerly protected the art sector. You know that among gallery owners, collectors, it is a sector with certain difficulty for good new artists in the analogical plane who wanted to make themselves known, who wanted to succeed. They have always been very protectionist with this. And in this case, blockchain, all the technologies that through the certification of NFTs and other appearances have surrounded us in recent years, what it has done is to crack a classic industry, let's say from top to bottom, and a sector that was previously bounded, protected and controlled has burst in, and suddenly platforms have appeared where they can trade their art, safe ways of transacting by skipping other intermediaries. That is to say, for me, digital art is a new fantastic discipline. We can see it, we take it, and we love it. We are not closed, far from it. Casa Batlló is essentially a heritage where what it evokes beyond beauty is inspiration. We know this because people who visit us constantly tell us so. And we know it because we have done the test with many artists. For me, artists are special people. I have had the good fortune to work with many of them, and they are people who are divinely touched, some more, some less, but they are all people whose eyes shine. And it is true that they speak and they are different. They are special people. That's why they do those works or those crazy proposals. And all or most of them tell you that when they enter Casa Batlló, they are inspired. So we want to enhance and capitalize on this intrinsic value that this work has in itself, to provoke contemporary artists, that is living artists, to come, to be inspired by Casa Batlló, to create their art as it has done, and others in the past, and some with whom we are working now. So one of our challenges welcoming this new wave, let's say, of digital artists, but I repeat also analog, is to facilitate Casa Batlló as a platform of inspiration for them to create immersive art proposals, which we want to host in Casa Batlló and then travel around the world. So this is a line we are working on.
And speaking a little bit, we have a little bit of time left. But to remove these barriers, what does Casa Batlló have in mind for the future? What can you share with us?
What barriers?
The barriers for new digital artists to enter this world, let's say, more traditional. So what plans does Casa Batlló have for the future?
The truth is, it's hard for me to answer you because I don't see barriers to remove. On the contrary, what I see are opportunities to take. And there are dozens of them. Now, our colleague gave us a lot of cases of chat GPT and AI services. As I was telling you before, for me, the scenario that is coming is a scenario of extreme personalization, because Web3 allows, let's say, to identify at all times the person who is interacting, the assets that this person has, the property, and through a tremendous synchronization of information. You have an identity when you browse, something that before you only had if you were logged into a social network or if you had your email account. Let's say that this paradigm changes with Web3. And the next thing that follows is that if you already know who I am, why are you teaching me the same as everyone else? I can personalize content, so personalization is going to be, I think, a very important vector in all this transformation. And at Casa Batlló, we are embracing it as well. We are now aware that we release the same audio to everyone when they visit the house and that we could personalize the contents to improve the customer experience. We have been working for a year on a project in which we are seeing how to do a psychological profiling of the person before entering to know if they are an extroverted person, if they are an open person, talkative, whatever, add a bracelet, let's say, or an IgG meter to see the current emotional state at the moment of entering the building. And combining those two variables, we are working like a Siri, let's say a virtual assistant, but with our own NLP, which we have nourished, enriched with a lot of content, let's say, curated so that we are able to customize the content based on the visitor's profile, the emotional state of the visitor, and in real time. To do that, you start a lot of linked technologies, but what you get is that a person can enter Casa Batlló. And if you and I go in, he is explaining something different from mine, and based on how you react to the content he is explaining to you, he understands the software to understand if the content delivered is increasing engagement.
It adapts.
It modifies, it tunes the explanation based on what you show more interest in or where it sees that you are getting more engagement because we are monitoring your constants. Then it allows another very cool thing, it allows dialogue. We now have an audio guide that is unidirectional. It allows you to interrupt, it allows you to have a dialogue, ask if you hear this column, whatever it is, then it allows dialogue. It is a very amusing thing that until now has not been known, and it seeks to improve, let's say, the experience, giving information in real time as you go through the building. And
that is allowing new generations to come more? How are they noticing that? Because there are many museums that feel as if they have fewer and fewer people coming. That is, you are making another approach, you are incorporating technology. You are noticing this in the new generations, which are obviously more immersive generations, more involved in their own little worlds. Are you noticing it in the face-to-face form, or do you still not see that change?
Not so much in a generational change, but in a change in the adoption of technology. There is more and more predisposition to, but it is not focused on low-age audiences.